Today, the Acropolis of Athens and its Parthenon temple remain some of the most enduring symbols of the classical world. In its prime, some 2,400 years ago, the city was renowned as the premier centre of Hellenic civilization. Still looming large in popular memory through its art, literature, philosophy, its democratic governing system, as well as its preeminent military strength. And yet, the Acropolis has a much older history too, still seen in the fragments of Cyclopean wall that remain. In the lowest sections of that mighty stone-built barricade, tracing around the edge of the entire hilltop. Perhaps in part because of this still visible heritage of the world that came before, unlike most other city-states of its time, Athens still proudly emphasised an undisturbed continuity from the vaunted ancestors of the heroic age. Supposedly having survived the Bronze Age collapse to build towards what could eventually be considered the golden age of the Athenians in the 5th century BC. Indeed, far from totally a myth, the strong traditions and rich mythology of the Athenians does seem to have been at least partly derived from a real Mycenaean past. A state having emerged here in Attica during the first half of the 2nd millennium BC. In myth, it was from the Peloponnese to the south that the Achaean ancestors of the Athenians first stemmed, spreading their influence across the Greek mainland, subduing, assimilating, and in some cases expelling the local Helladic tribes of their original homelands. In the region of Attica, north of the tiny spit of land connecting the Peloponnese to the rest of Greece, the Achaeans allegedly dwelled alongside two other prehistoric tribes, the Corcones and the Cranioi. According to the legend, the original Attican ruler, Actaeus, was succeeded by Cecrops, another of the newcomers. It is he who is credited with the foundation of Athens. In the tale, perhaps unsurprisingly, this first foundation was on the Acropolis. That mighty natural formation of rock being where Cecrops united the tribes. Though selecting a patron deity to watch over the new city proved to be much more complicated than building the settlement itself. Two Olympian gods rushing in to make their claims. First to arrive was Poseidon, god of the sea, brother to Zeus, the king of the gods. Upon hulking his mighty form onto the Acropolis, Poseidon struck it hard with his trident, causing a mighty dent, and symbolising the future naval power of the settlement and favour of the sea god. Shortly afterwards, however, appeared Athena, goddess of wisdom, having been born from Zeus's mind. she created an olive tree on the Acropolis, a symbol of peace and prosperity. King Cecrops accepted the olive tree, thus making Athena victorious. In the goddess's honour, the city was named Athenae, or Athens. Whether the story reflects real half-remembered and simplified events of competing religious cults, perhaps between old gods and the new, we simply can't say. Most of the Mycenaean ruins of the city, lying underneath layer upon layer of much later foundations, having been inhabited all through history to today. It is now by far the largest city in all of Greece. Over the last 200 years of scholarship, however, some archaeology has been done. Built on a respectable scale, but seemingly not quite as large or as impressive as Mycenae, Tiryns or Pylos, the palatial centre at Athens, ranking alongside the medium-sized palaces, was still undoubtedly wildly important to the denizens of Attica and its dependent regions. Its importance during earlier ages can be seen too, as well as its links to the sea, in the form of a huge Cycladic idol found on the Acropolis. Largest ever discovered outside of the islands of the Aegean. Given the hints of Neolithic activity found here too, it remains clear that this was an important place long before the Late Bronze Age. Like at most Mycenaean power centres, at the very heart of the Acropolis stood the Megaron, surrounded by administrative and residential buildings for the court. Just as it is today, the outer cliff's edge of the Acropolis was surrounded by a Cyclopean wall. At around 760 metres long, 10 metres high and 4 to 6 metres thick, it would have been wildly impressive in its day. Surviving only in fragments now. Though perhaps preceded by a smaller fortification, the wall that still survives was likely completed in the 14th century, serving as the main defence of Bronze Age Athens. Just as it was in classical times, bordered by potentially hostile and powerful neighbours in Boeotia to the west and the Argolid to the south. According to Herodotus and earlier somewhat garbled myths that survive, the structure was known as the Pelasgic Wall, in reference to its supposed builders, the Pelasgians. A people who had been allowed to settle in Attica around Mount Hymettus, thus becoming some of the inhabitants of Athens. It is also reported that the Pelasgians belonged to the tribe of the Chronoioi. In myth, one of the 3 earliest peoples of the region. Either way, safe behind their mighty bastions, the elites of Mycenaean Athens continued to expand and build on their strategic position from then onwards. Notably with a port being constructed, Poseidon's early patronage fulfilled. Unlike the famous Piraeus port, however, built by Themistocles in the 5th century BC, and still very much in use today, the Mycenaean foundation, of a much more modest size than its Classical Age successor, was placed at Phaleron. Today, only fragments survive. Perhaps the best surviving example of the significant wealth and influence of the 14th century elites of Athens comes in the form of the funerary evidence. The impressive Acharnae Tholos tomb to the northeast of the city, being covered in a large mound of earth and surrounded by a low wall on all sides. Within, 6 individuals were interred. Perhaps the ruling family of the Mycenaean settlement. As usual, wildly expensive personal belongings of jewellery, gold, silver and bronze accompanied the dead. Seals of semi-precious stones, boar tusk helmets, bronze weapons, and numerous other items, showing off international links and the prominent standing of the dead in the hierarchical system of the Late Bronze Age. And Athens was not alone. Just one of 12 legendary towns, having been unified in the Age of Heroes to form the region of Attica and its foremost city. Unlike many myths, a number of the towns of this Sinoicism have been confirmed with archaeology too. Not far from Athens airport today, the ancient city of Brauron seems another world from the hustle and bustle of the capital. Beautiful marshland oozes, classical structures rise, and an excellent museum is to be visited. In the time of the Persian Wars, Brauron suffered devastation at the hands of the invading armies of Xerxes. The same fate as the capital. Though here, the population may not have been lucky enough to escape the destruction. And unlike Athens, Brauron didn't have the resources to bounce back. It was never the same again. In the site museum, many artifacts are housed from the surrounding region, testament to its importance in Mycenaean times, as well as before. Looming over the classical city still today is the old Acropolis. Here on the hilltop, though mostly forgotten now, stand the Mycenaean remains of the stronghold. Flourishing here in the second half of the 2nd millennium BC, as well as in ancient days even before. To the south, not far from the port of Lavrion, another settlement stands. A gateway to the Cyclades today, just as it was in ancient times. Nearby silver mines give a hint of just how Athens became so rich in the classical era and before. For not surprisingly, here is more genuine archaeological evidence for another of the mythic towns of the Attican League. genuine archaeological evidence for Lavrion, another of the mythic towns of the Attican League. Yet another stands not far away at the site of the great victory against the Persians at Marathon. And also likely at Eleusis too. Site of the famous psychedelic mystery cult, as well as a likely Mycenaean centre. Heading inland from Lavrio, yet another ancient city rises up. On the jagged crags above this one, a collection of impressive Mycenaean chamber tombs still sprawl. As well as one of the most impressive surviving fortifications in all of Attica. This is Thorikos. From the pinnacle of this Bronze Age holdout, the blue waters of the Aegean beckon. It's not difficult to picture Attican lords going about their business here. Manning the coastline on behalf of their rulers to the north. Or maybe striking out on their own. For all of the centuries of scholarship that have gone into studying the Mycenaean world, the exact relationship of all these peripheral centres with the supposed capital of Athens remains unknown. It could be that they were all independent at one time or another. Just as it is possible they were always ruled over by that powerful centre, alone able to create such a vast series of outworks and bastions, only a little of which survive today. Unfortunately, due to the intense remodelling of the Acropolis all the way down to the present, no palatial structures nor Linear B archive has ever been found. It's likely they never will. Nevertheless, from the shreds that do survive, we can say a little of the fate of that great Bronze Age centre. At some point prior to the 13th century BC, the great blight of Bronze Age Greece appears to have hit the citadel. Poseidon's wrath coming back to haunt the Athenians, in the form of an earthquake which appears to have created a fissure on the northeastern side of the Acropolis, extending to a bed of soft rock. Habitation continued without issue, however, with a well being dug where the fissure had hit, connected by an extensive series of stairs. Poseidon had gifted the city with a source of drinking water during any potential siege. Despite not being the largest of Mycenaean centres, Athens is given regular mention in the mythological accounts. The most well-known of all concerning the legendary hero who would unify all of Attica under Athenian authority. Of course, the mighty monster hunter from Trojan who we've met before, ending up here after his adventures on the road from the south. His name was Theseus. In one of the most famous Greek myths of all, known by most in the West, and many the world over too. The Athenians were then compelled by the all-powerful king of Minoan Crete, Minos, to sacrifice 7 of their male and 7 female youths every 9 years to his monstrous son, the Minotaur. A half-man, half-bull creature that dwelled inside the Cretan labyrinth near far-off Knossos. Lair of the all-powerful Cretans, in those days ruling the seas with their mighty navy, to such an extent that Herodotus defined it as a thalassocracy, or empire of the sea, reflected today in very real prominence in the archaeology. On the 3rd round of choosing sacrificial victims to be sent to Minos' court, wishing to bring an end to the unholy deal once and for all, and defeat the Minotaur, Theseus, the reunited son of the Athenian king Aegeus, solemnly volunteered to go. Departing with black sails on his mighty vessel, Theseus promised his father that if he were successful, he'd change his sails to white before returning home, to symbolise his victory. Upon arriving in Crete, Theseus learned that the labyrinth was so massive that upon entering, no one yet had been able to find a way out, let alone defeat the creature which dwelled within. Fortunately for the Athenian prince, operating on pure blind luck and bravado at this point, he was spotted by King Minos' daughter, Ariadne, gifting him a lengthy piece of thread with which he could eventually find his way out of the maze. Once inside the labyrinth, Theseus ultimately came head to head with the monstrous beast, finally immortalising himself with the likes of Bellerophon, Perseus, Cadmus and Heracles by battling and slaying it. Freeing himself from the labyrinthine maze by using the spindle given to him by Ariadne, the two escaped the island. After yet more adventures on Naxos, Ariadne was cast aside by the hero prince, herself becoming entangled with the demigod Dionysus. But that's a story for another day. Somewhere, amidst all the adventuring, in an incident to rival the greatest of Greek tragedies, and one which echoes throughout history in various other stories from the classical world to today, Theseus forgot to switch his sails. Eagerly awaiting the return of his son at Cape Sunion on the peninsula to the south of the Athenian Acropolis, Aegeus saw what he feared most. The sails were the wrong colour. Thinking his son and heir to be dead, he threw himself into the sea, which still bears his name today. In the millennia to come, Theseus would remain the greatest of all Athenian heroes, worshipped long after the Mycenaean age as the ultimate king. By the time of the Trojan War, Athens remained a significant Achaean settlement. So much so that according to Homer, it was able to contribute 50 ships to Agamemnon's fleet. By that time, one of the other main contributors to the Armada may seem surprising at first glance. For by then, a great deal had changed. The tables having been turned on Minos' great sea empire. For one of the largest contingents of Mycenaean warriors of all came from Crete, and Minos' capital of Knossos itself. If you enjoyed this brief exploration into the world of prehistoric Athens, here's 6 more hours I made on the entire Bronze Age Greek world. Thanks, and see you next time.